With auras being deleted soon, Jagex have now announced their final, potentially, plans, what they will do with the remaining aura effects they want to keep in-game. I would also recommend watching my previous aura video, or don't, I'm not your dad or your boss, so you do whatever you feel like. They start off by addressing some concerns with the blogs that they've been posting, saying that a lot of the blogs are just to gauge interest and community discussion and not necessarily to say exactly what's happening, but to see how people feel about the changes and then adjust accordingly. Some of these blogs are for content updates scheduled quite far in advance, so that gives them plenty of time to change things the way players would like to see it changed. And so that with these blogs, just keep in mind that it's mainly for discussion and to give ideas and feedback about the changes. With that said, they have taken in the feedback from the previous blog and all the discussion around it, and they have some plans going forward. Firstly, they want to address the question of why not just keep auras the way they are and change the cooldown and maybe change the uptime to just let you have them on all the time. And Jagex says that they feel the aura system is quite disconnected from the game itself. It doesn't necessarily tie into the game mechanics, instead it's just an extra layer that feels removed from the game. And that's largely true. You click on the aura equipment slot and you get an interface up. It's not like the auras are physical items. On top of that, all of them pretty much get unlocked through a shop on the website. It's not in-game. Pretty sure there's only like a total of 6 you can get in-game, like the ones from Wars and then also one from Dungeoneering. There's no tutorials about auras in-game, no lore explanation for their existence. And there are ways they could get around that. They could add it through different kinds of content and make it feel more integrated into the world, but that's a lot of extra work that doesn't necessarily even need to exist just to keep the system around. What they've opted for instead is to reintroduce the effects and the power into the game more naturally through leveling up or through items, things that already feel natural into the game, essentially. And since they're trying to sunset Solomon's store and have the marketplace in-game be the main place to buy stuff anyway, and they're naturally also removing the loyalty point system with that, they're decluttering a lot of that extra website fluff that you could otherwise just have in-game. I vastly prefer the in-game marketplace over Solomon's store anyway, so I think this is a good change. And again, you could say, well, just put the auras into the in-game store as well, and I mean, that is an option, but I can see that they're moving in a direction where they want to remove the auras, and I generally agree that the aura system doesn't need to exist. It very much was a reason to get people to buy membership when they didn't necessarily want to. There's a sort of predatory feeling about being taken advantage of connected to loyalty points, in my opinion. Not to mention it took years and years to accumulate enough points to get some of the more useful auras that you would want. So I'm generally just happy that the system is being removed. And they do say that while completely removing auras, their effects, and the associated system was an option on the table, the road to restoration is fundamentally aimed at returning integrity to the game, not simply ripping things out with a machete, you know? We want to find good solutions to keep your experience with the game enjoyable. And that means integrating our favorite effects into the game again through more natural methods. So with that in mind, we want to ensure that the community still has access to the most beloved effects. So next up, the balancing around the changes of the auras. They say aura acquisition has been extremely gated by time locks, the loyalty point system. That does also naturally mean that the more powerful auras are held by less players because it takes so long to accumulate so many points, sometimes many years to get enough points. As such, not everyone playing now has auras, especially the higher tier ones. So you might have the second highest one, but you might not have the best one for everything, right? Unless you've been playing for 12 years, in which case you probably have most of them. So they say with that in mind, they have to be a bit mindful of what level of power they're introducing back into the game. They don't just want to increase everyone's power suddenly by 20% across the board because not everyone had access to 20% power before. They say that that could have knock-on effects to potential skilling and combat sources. So a very small percentage of players, they say, were using the best auras that give 15% resources in various different training methods. From the previous blog, if I remember correctly, I think they were landing on around 5%. So say, for example, the woodcutting lumberjack aura, I think it went up to 15 at the highest one. They were looking to give hatchets a 5% more success rate. And that seems fine. It balances out a bit. Most people were using the lower ones. A few people were using the higher ones. And even so, you have a 1 hour of the 15%. So it skewers towards being lower than 15% overall anyway. So here they give some statistic examples. They say Vampyrism is the most used aura by players each day. On average over the past month, it's been representative of 6.6% of daily members using it. 6% still isn't crazy, but I mean, obviously, not everyone is doing bossing in game, right? And if you're doing bossing, you might be using more powerful auras that boost your damage instead. But then those are also split between all the different combat styles. That's why they're not number one. A lot of people might have just not been using auras at all as well. But Vampirism is generally a universally good aura because you get passive healing from it. I'd say that I think I actually use the Penance aura more than Vampirism myself because I just love not having to think about my prayer potions. I know I'm taking damage and it's filling up my prayer, so I don't have to accidentally, oh no, my prayer ran out and I got smacked for a 5,000 and died instantly. I don't have to worry about that kind of thing happening when bossing. Saying that if I were doing higher level bosses, I would be using DPS auras anyway, so I wouldn't be using either of them for those. Both of them are convenience auras. They're more for a laid back experience. If you want the raw damage, you'd be using something else other than Vampirism and Penance. They then say that Legendary Greenfinger, that one's very popular for herb farming because it increases the amount of herbs you get from your patches. This one represented a 2.7% of daily members using it. So Legendary isn't the strongest one. I think it's the second strongest, and then Supreme is the strongest. That one only had 0.3% of people using it. The thing about these statistics though is that they're based on the entire player base playing, right? What are the statistics for the people doing farming? Because sure, 2.7% of daily members are using Legendary Greenfinger, but how many daily percent of players are doing farming, right? It could be that 80% of people doing farming are using Legendary Greenfinger, but this makes it seem like very few people are using it. Here's another one for Legendary 5-Finger Discount, comes in at 7th most used. This one has a 2.7% of daily members. So again, it's the same amount as Legendary Greenfinger, but it's based on daily members. Like how many people that are doing thieving are using Legendary 5-Finger Discount? Is there a 90% attachment rate to the thieving players on these auras? That's something they haven't addressed in the blog. That's why you kind of need a lot of statistics and numbers when you start pulling out statistic numbers like this, because effectively percentages can be skewed in whatever direction you want to spin them, right? You just gotta keep that in mind. I'm not saying that they're trying to deceive us or anything like that. I'm just saying to think a little bit about it. Just keep in mind that percentages don't necessarily always represent useful information. I just want to get you guys thinking critically about some of those things. So they say even the most used auras represent a small percentage of daily players. But they also then go on to say, of course, there are many factors that go into this, such as what stage of a game people are at and what kind of content they're focusing on. And they also say that they don't want to stop you from feeling powered up. They want to essentially not nerf you too much, but they want to find a nice balance where it makes sense and it's not overpowered. In my head, this is how Jagex see the aura system, right? Excuse my very bad paint skills. Essentially, the strongest auras have very few people using them, whereas higher amount of people use weaker auras. And I'd say that some people didn't even use auras at all. So there's a large amount of players who didn't really use auras, whereas the hyper invested people were using the strongest auras. So what Jagex have sort of landed on is following where this one is at, right? The red one. They want to give everyone the red aura's area of effect. Still, like, not tons of people were even at that level before, so they are giving a massive buff to pretty much the entire player base, right? With these changes. Everyone over here will get a massive power increase. And overall, that will mean that there will be more resources coming into the game, because this amount of players does not offset the tiny extra amount that the high level players were getting. And so instead of having this power curve, this is just where everyone will be at. Everyone will just be at that power. For a net community perspective, is a massive boost from what it was at before. So, what feedback did we give them on the previous blog? And they talk a little bit about that. They said that we don't like slot competition, mainly talking about the pocket slot having too many options already and not adding Vampirism and Penance to the pocket slot. I mean, Vampirism already exists in the pocket slot, but not necessarily adding more Vampirism to the pocket slot when there's already other things we would like to use in the pocket slot. There are concerns about adding it to the relic system for archaeology or for invention perks, because those also have a lot of options already, and people don't necessarily like swapping those in and out constantly. I mean, doing it for invention perks can get really expensive fast, and doing it for relics is just kind of annoying. There were also some concerns about the aura effects being weakened or reduced when changing into this new system, and I don't think they're planning on doing that for the combat ones. I think those are staying quite similar. So they say they've tried to maintain the aura's effects throughout all of these changes. They've also made some tweaks to content that already exists where appropriate, such as adding pilfer points to heists. So that's interesting. They're adding thieving guild currency to the high level heists, which does make sense because there is a thieving guild representative at the heist locations. So them giving you points for completing the heist isn't the craziest thing to do. And they also want to stress that these details are always subject to change based on design balancing and timelines, so they're not necessarily set in stone yet. You can give feedback about them. So we start off with Skilling Auras. We've got Demonheim. All passive effects remain as passive, so nothing's changing there. The 1 hour activation for Prayer Restore will simply also become passive effect, and a Thok Headbutt animation will be added to the wardrobe animations. Focus Siphoning is used in RuneSpan, and it will become a passive unlock through the Wizard Rinzit runecrafting shop. So for RuneSpan points, you can purchase that passive effect. The Green Finger Aura is being added to Sidekick's shop, which is the Crux Equal favor system. So they encourage you to do herb farming and you gain points for doing herb farming. They have a bunch of herb related unlocks already, so it makes perfect sense that this one would come from there. That was mainly where Green Finger Aura was being used anyway, and that will become a passive unlock as well. The 5-finger discount Thieving Aura, which increases your thieving success chance, will be added to the Thieving Guild for Pilfer points to just purchase and unlock, and that will become a passive unlock as well once you've got it. And they also say here too, they're making heists give Pilfer points, so you won't have to go back to the Thieving Guild. If you're doing heists, you will just naturally get the points from doing that. Enrichment increases the chance of gaining enriched memories while doing divination. They say that they're just buffing divination across the board to do that, and I think they've already done it for the lower levels, so they'll add that for the medium and high level areas as well. Quarrymaster Aura, they were initially planning to remove this one, but they've decided not to based on player feedback, players wanting to keep it around. So instead, they're adding the power from this aura into the skill itself while leveling. So at level 59 mining, you will gain +5 critical strike chance, and then another 5% at 85 mining. So that will just become passive as well as you level up your mining skill. And they say that people mainly wanted to keep this around for Croasis and Gate of Illidanus, the skilling bosses, because it's quite useful there. Next up, Call of the Sea, that is the fishing aura. Increases your success chance while fishing. They say that they've added this to different tools, and also the Perfect Juju Fishing Potion also applies to the Perfect Plus Potion, I imagine, though they didn't list that one here. But Perfect Plus just uses all the Perfect Juju Potions effects anyway, so 5% more from the Juju Fishing, so it's up to 10 now. The tools have also had their fishing success chance increased, so Rodomatic has 3, Dragon Harpoon is being increased to 9, Crystal Rod is going up to 8, Tavia's Rod is up to 13, and then they've also boosted it for some summoning familiars. So Granite Crab will have 1 higher percent, Ibis 2%, and Granite Lobster will have a 3% higher than before. And they say that these changes will bolster the existing rewards and just make them stronger, give you more of a reason to unlock them in-game. The Lumberjack Aura for wood cutting, they've said that they've just increased the effectiveness of hatchets, so all the power from the Lumberjack Aura will just get added to hatchets passively. We've then got Tracker, that's the Hunting Aura. They say they're directly buffing the success chance of capturing creatures across the board on the hunting skill, and they've already done that for birds and kebets with the early game rebalance update, and they're planning to do that again, I guess, with the mid and late game rebalances. Resourceful is the final one. This one was generally aura that duplicated your resources when you were doing certain things like mining or doing archaeology. They say they were originally planning to simply remove all of this, but there was some pushback on that idea, mainly from people training archaeology. So it was very useful for crystal and red sandstone because it would give you more of those per day when there was a daily cap, but they're removing the daily cap on those sandstones, so they don't feel like it needs to exist for that anymore, which is fair. You'll just be able to mine those indefinitely anyway. But people were using it for archaeology material caches. Sometimes those would disappear quite fast, and so they're planning to increase a guaranteed minimum amount of materials before the cache depletes. And that means that the caches from archaeology will overall give you more resources before going down. They've also re-examined Flameproof. This one increases cooking success chance, and they feel like it's not that necessary considering there already is cooking gauntlets, and also the 99 cape perk prevents you from burning food anyway, so they might as well just remove that one. And the same for Sure-Footed. That one increased your success chance when finishing agility courses. They say that the failure rate was so tiny anyway that they figured they might as well just not keep it. Dedicated Slayer would have a chance of not depleting your existing Slayer task number. Illumination would simply give you more experience. I think it was like 10%. And Jack of Trades, if you trained a certain amount of skills, you would get an experience lamp. So that one was also just generally experience related. So all those are being removed. Next up, we've got combat auras. What are they planning to do with those? They've revised the combat ones, saying that they are trying to avoid adding them to existing slots, and they've got a general idea of what they want to do with them now. So Vampyrism, one of the popular ones, they're planning to create an aspect for the effect, calling it Vampyrism Aspect, under a new category called Sustain Aspects. Now, the categories don't mean that much, it's just the organization method. You can only have one aspect going at a time. They say this will unlock through the Ancient Spellbook at 68 magic, costs 15 blood, 10 death, 6 soul, and 40 fire runes to cast. If you're unfamiliar with aspects, they are spells that last for 12 minutes, and they give a certain effect. So every 12 minutes you would have to recast Vampirism to gain the effect. Going by this rune cost, I would estimate it to be about 100k an hour, and you'd be casting it 5 times an hour. I'd say the main downside of the aspect idea is that it will be competing with Darkness and Animate Dead. You can only have one aspect going at a time. It's funny though that they went with the aspect idea, because I did suggest that in the previous video on auras I did. I personally quite like the idea because it's a way of tying it into the game more naturally anyway. The downside, of course, like I said, is that it can't work with Darkness anymore like it does right now. I think it's good that they are going with it in this direction though, because if they didn't have it as an aspect and you could just have it on the side, you would effectively give everyone lifesteal or infinite prayer. High-level players would just build it into their kits, and now suddenly everyone has lifesteal all the time. I imagine some people won't be happy with this decision though, so we'll have to see what people think. They say this is aimed as a mid-game unlock, works the same way as other aspects. You can only have one at a time, lasting for 12 minutes. I think this is good though, because it balances it off as a mid-game unlock rather than an endgame one. Endgame players will continue to use Darkness because Darkness is better. Pretty much a flat 20% damage reduction in a lot of cases. In situations where you don't need that extra 20% of damage reduction though, Vampirism does become useful. They said that they're doing the same thing with the Penance Aura, turning that one into an aspect as well, from the same category of Sustain. This will be unlocked on the normal spellbook, however, at 62 magic, costing 30 body, 30 mind, 15 soul, and 20 chaos. So that comes out to be a bit more than this one. I think this one's 150k. I mean, obviously, rune prices will go up and down all the time anyway, but I believe at the current prices, that's what it's at. And again, they say this would work like the existing ones. You can only have one aspect at a time, and it lasts for 12 minutes per cast. So yeah, I'm happy with that change, to be honest. I think that's a good plan to go forward with. I think it's better than creating a whole new altar at War's Retreat. Like, that's the power creep fantasy right there of just adding vampirism to everyone. I think this is a far more balanced way of approaching it. So Salvation, Harmony, and Corruption, those were related to prayer training. They're saying they're adding this effect to the Sun Spear. They're also tweaking the effect a little bit. Currently, they say that it activates on average every 2 Vire kills. They want to activate it on every single Vire kill, so they've halved the power of it, and now it activates every time you kill something. That should just make it more consistent while keeping the same level of power to it. Poison Purge is an aura that would prevent you from being poisoned. They want to tie this into the anti-poison totem. That's an item you can get from the Dungeoneering store, and it essentially prevents you from being poisoned as well. They say that they want to remove the ability to hold the anti-poison totem in the offhand slot and only have it wearable in pocket slot. So at the moment you can hold it in your hand, but you can also have it in your pocket slot. Like, you can pick whichever one you want. I think this seems fine that they only want to have it in the pocket slot. They're increasing the immunity it gives in the pocket slot to 100%. It totally stops poison when you have it on. And if you drink an anti-poison potion on top of having it equipped, you will now start healing from poison. That's kind of neat. I like that concept. It also gives a quirky side grade effect to that potential item. I don't believe it's a very popularly used item at the moment, so that's kind of cool. They say they saw an opportunity to add some quality of life to the anti-poison totem here, but they do say that it's kind of a niche thing, and since Venom Blood already exists, that's the invention perk that prevents poison. They'll be seeing if they have time to add this one. If they don't, then they'll just scrap the idea. But it's something that they would like to add, so they will if they have time. And then the final one is the Desert Pantheon Aura. This one had like 5 different things it did, but they're only keeping one of them, and that is the Might of Het. The Might of Het would increase your life points by a maximum of 1,500, and they're adding this effect to the Totem of Auras instead. They say they didn't want to remove the Totem of Auras completely, and they're not going ahead with the Totem of Skilling idea, so instead they're turning this one into the Totem of Vitality. So effectively, if you have this totem activated, you will get a small life point boost, which seems perfectly fine to me. It has generally high requirements of like high agility and high slayer to activate, so it seems like a good reason to get that. I'm pretty sure that the Totem of Auras was a popular totem anyway before, so I think it will continue to stay popular with this edition. Here they list all the combat auras that have been removed with Monday's combat remodernization update. They do note that Equilibrium was part of this list, and that they're currently monitoring how Necromancy feels because they know that Necromancers generally use Equilibrium. I'm hoping that they do buff it a little bit. There's also some miscellaneous auras being removed. That one being Friend in Need would summon Party Pete. It was generally useless. Oddball would turn your cannonballs into random objects. That one was just kind of quirky. Wisdom gave you a little bit extra experience, and the Prime one would also just boost your experience a little bit. So they go on to talk a little bit about the Marks of War and what they're planning to do with those, as well as aura and life refreshes. And at the moment, Marks of War is what you get from slaying boss monsters, and is a sort of a currency you use in War's Retreat. Once you've unlocked everything, you generally just bought aura refreshes and life refreshes. Life refreshes would reset your sign of life, so give you an extra life essentially. If you did get killed by something and your sign of life would activate, it would heal you a little bit and give you another chance to survive. So yeah, you could refresh that with some items in the store. They say that generally now there's nothing in the Marks of War store anymore except for life refreshes. That will be the only thing that's still in there, but they are planning to remove life refreshes with the microtransaction item deletion that's happening next year. So they'll keep them there for now, and then they'll see what they plan to do with Marks of War later. But effectively, life refreshes will be the only thing you'll be able to purchase for a while, I guess. Oh yeah, they also mentioned that you can get aura refreshes from Rare Drop Table, and they'll obviously be removing that as well. So about aura refunds. They have sort of been avoiding this topic on social media, so it'll be interesting to see what they have to say about that. They say that since the loyalty store is being closed and loyalty points will no longer have an in-game function, they don't feel there's a point in refunding people loyalty points, and they're sort of right. All the cosmetics are planned to be given out for free eventually anyway, so you'd just be refunding people points. They would get the cosmetics a little bit earlier, but there's not a whole lot of point to it. There may be a handful of other items you can get though, like consumable items for loyalty points, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how useful those items would be anyway, though. In saying that, though, some people have spent bonds or other in-game currencies to purchase some auras. So they do say any player who spent bonds to acquire an aura in the past 3 months after 1st of December will have those bonds automatically returned to their account when the aura overhaul goes live. So that's great news. If you purchased an aura generally after the Road to Restoration was announced, you'll just get that back again. I feel like that's generally fair. If you've had the aura for more than 3 months, you've probably gotten some use out of it at that point. They also say any player who purchased the Majorat aura using Reaper points in the last 90 days, so since the 3rd of December, will have those points refunded as well in full. And I feel like that seems fine. I've seen a lot of comments about people saying, oh, they're deleting our items that we worked so hard to get. Like, first of all, you didn't work to get these items. They were just given to you for being a member. They're freebies, they're gifts for saying, like, thank you for subscribing. But most importantly, I want to stress this point extremely well too. They're not deleting the effects. The effects are being repurposed into the game. The combat ones have already been added to the game. We are more powerful now than we were before. They're adding these skilling effects into different skilling methods. We're not actually losing the aura effects and the aura power. It's being introduced into the game. Vampyrism will still exist in some form. Penance will also exist in some form. They're not removing them. It's one thing if they deleted it and then just said, okay, that's good enough. But they're not. They're actually working these effects into the game. They're not stealing your hard-earned loyalty point reward items. They're even giving out all the stuff in the store for free. So, I mean, I don't know what else that they could really do. You could say, oh, convert my loyalty points into rune coins. And I mean, they're not the same system. There are situations where I have felt like they could refund people rune coins, mainly in the cosmetic changes that they were planning to do, but they haven't gone through with yet. But for loyalty points, I don't feel like it's necessary. Like I say, they're not removing the effects, they're just making them accessible through in-game methods. They do end on a note by saying, we understand that many of you invested loyalty points over time, and we truly appreciate that commitment. Our focus is to ensure that the update system feels strong, healthier, and more rewarding for a future of RuneScape. They continue by saying they hope they addressed the feedback by shifting the place these effects come from to much more friendly and less competitive slots compared to the first blog, and they're planning to implement the above changes, but will of course keep an eye on discussions and see how feedback unfolds. And how has the feedback unfolded? Well, it's looking pretty good, 85%, pretty respectable number. Very first one is critical of the percentages, so that's fair. So when they say, would it be detrimental to the game if everyone just had the best aura? Yes, I think it would. I think it would definitely be a crazy power increase. Here's a question. For those who own the auras, will the effects already be unlocked in the new sources of getting them? I mean, if you have 70 magic, you'll just get Vampirism instantly, right? There may be some skilling ones that I imagine we'd have to unlock ourselves. I don't necessarily think it would take long, though, to get any of them. I don't think they would also purposefully make the grinds on them long, considering that a lot of people had these auras unlocked. That is something that they could have touched upon more in the blog, though, that is true. Like the ideas, very good change, but not so fond of the idea of the aspects being tied to certain spellbooks. It is true that you would have to swap to Ancients if you wanted Vampirism, though I think Vampirism actually fits quite nicely into the Ancient spellbook because of whole blood spells thing, and Penance probably fits better into the normal spellbook rather than the lunar spellbook, so I'd say it's mainly a problem for mage players though, because they would be using a specific spellbook. Others could just swap them out around. High-level players will likely continue to use whatever spellbook is necessary for them in those certain scenarios. It's a sort of a balancing decision too, though, right? They don't want to give you every single power active at all times. And spellbook swap does exist, so you could swap between certain ones if you have access to that. One person did suggest adding the aspects into the necromancy ritual book instead so that you could pick between the ones you wanted without having to spellbook swap, and that is totally an idea that could work as well. The idea of vampirism siphoning life from your attacks and penance absorbing energy from attacks that hit you. That would give more relevance to necromancy runes though, rather than normal runes, which might need more syncs, I don't know. This person says they prefer it being a relic power or perks or pocket slot items over aspects. I disagree. I prefer it being an aspect. Any thoughts on making the aspects tabletable? That's actually kind of an interesting idea. I didn't think about that. Having aspect tablets created through the new player-owned house system could actually be a cool idea. Then you can have aspect tablets with you in your inventory and just crack one open when you want the effect. Kind of turns it into a potion at that point. This person says, small correction, auras are in fact in the lore, and Schwan says that they are created in the Eastern lands. I mean, it's such a cop-out answer though, because I mean, you could say any kind of mysterious artifact is created in the Eastern lands. There was no mention of them when we went to the Ark in the Eastern lands at all either, as far as I can remember. I think they just threw that in to have some kind of justification of why they existed. I don't think there was any massive significance behind it. You said you didn't want slots to compete, then you instantly made Vampirism and Penance into aspects, which directly competes with Darkness and Animate Dead. Absurdity! It must not stand! I can't tell if they're being serious. I think there has to be some kind of overlapping balance, because I mean, Vampirism combined with Darkness is very strong. And I mean, it comes down to skill issue, right? If you can't do it without the aura, maybe you shouldn't have had the aura at all. Isn't that a meme? If you couldn't do it without the power, then you didn't deserve the power in the first place. No, they bring up a valid point, though, obviously. It is a crutch. I'd say it's training wheels for learners. It will force people to get good, I guess, in the sense that you have to pick between Animate Dead or Vampirism. There is a whole discussion to be had around, should you be able to have both these effects at the same time? Will it force players to get better at combat if they don't have these training wheels to guide them and help them? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer here. I'm looking for discussion topics, really. Let me know what you think, but I totally get where they're coming from, though. Like, maybe it is good to have them. It makes things easier, obviously. Here's someone who says that they've been very critical of the design changes, but thank you for listening to feedback. Huge win listening to feedback on this one. I really like the idea of Vampirism and Penance being in the spellbook. Seems like a good compromise. Mod Breezy says that Vampirism will simply require Desert Treasure, which unlocks Ancient Magic, so that makes sense. That probably means that Penance Aura won't have a quest requirement. You'll just need the magic level to get it. I don't think that high-level players are running Vampirism with Darkness at the moment. I think this is more of like a high-level players who are AFKing bosses are doing this. But high-level players who are doing serious bossing at like higher difficulty levels are not using Vampirism at all. And they're definitely not using Penance because they would just be using the powder instead. They're using the DPS auras. So this feels more like a AFK-scape problem more than anything else. They also just buffed food to not drain as much adrenaline, so there's more of an incentive to actually use food now to heal yourself up again. That, not to mention Soul Split still exists, so you could always use that as well, right? Maybe another avenue they could look into is to actually let the pocket slot vampirism scrimshaw work with all styles. I know that at the moment, range is probably the one struggling the most with sustain. I mean, magic has blood spells, necromancy has ghost, melee just got dismember as a healing ability. I say that this is more of an AFK-scape issue because the people complaining about Vampirism and Penance being aspects are generally maxed or completionist players. Surely they are not the players that these should be aimed at, right? They're being spun as mid-level unlocks for mid-game players to help sustain them better. And yet the completionists and the maxed players are the ones complaining about it. Here they want you to be able to use multiple aspects. If you activate multiple aspects, you gain half of the power of the aspect. Can we just get an aspect book so they're not tied to a particular spell book? I'm kind of hesitant of letting us use more than one aspect because now suddenly you have aspect creep and now you've got a whole bunch of new buffs that you need to do. I think there's too many buffs as it is, so I don't really want to add even more. Here's again a trimmed completionist this time saying if you have the aspects locked together then you won't be able to use them with Darkness Animated. I do agree that it sucks that Equilibrium was removed as an aura for Necromancers. That's a fair point I have with them. But I find it so weird that completionist players are the ones having the most issues with Vampirism. I would rather the Vampirism spell lasted more time and cost more to cast. This completionist wants loyalty points to be transferred into Reaper points, Slayer points, or some type of other currency. It just feels weird to me that people aren't seeing that auras aren't being deleted. I mean, they are being deleted, but the effects are being added into the game, so we're not losing the effects. And yet people want full refunds for these things. Like, I get it, it feels bad to lose something, but you're not losing the effect. It's just being repurposed. There was a little discussion chain about the sure-footed aura being removed, the one that lets you succeed at agility courses. They say the agility pyramid is basically unusable at its recommended introduction level. Were people really training agility with the sure-footed aura? I don't even think I've activated that aura once. I mean, not only that, but the agility cape already makes you succeed at everything, I think. Doing underground pass without the sure-footed aura would not be fun. Morning's End Part 2. I mean, there are some creative ways that people were using sure-footed, surely, but I never thought to use it for any of those things. Plus, did people even have enough points to get the sure-footed aura? Were people spending all these points to unlock that aura just to do some of the agility things? I mean, sure, you can find problems if you go out looking for them, but were people actually doing these things? Something they didn't touch upon as well, yes, is what they mentioned here. Are they doing more than one free cosmetic a month for the loyalty point items? And surely they would have to. There is quite a few in there. Maybe they haven't decided on the number yet. Here, another completionist. With them becoming aspect-based, it feels like a nerf, being able to only use one of them at a time. What's up with all the completionist players wanting this mid-game unlock? I feel like all the completionists were AFKing something, and this is reducing their AFK time, so they're complaining about it. If you're a completionist player who dislikes the aspect idea, were you AFKing stuff with Vampirism? Is that why these players are upset? I want to know why. Only completionist players are complaining about it, pretty much. I swear to God, if you make me go back to RuneSpan again for the 1,000th time. Don't make this person go back to RuneSpan. Here's another one. Maxed main. Don't understand why you have to trade between Penance and This is getting weird now, man. This is getting so weird. Nobody else is complaining about it, pretty much. On the flip side, here's a completionist that loves the idea. So they say they're quite heavy on the soul runes, but you only cast this spell 5 times an hour, so you're not using that many soul runes, really. They're like 20k per cast, right? So that's 12 minutes per cast, 100k an hour. Yeah, exactly. This person also does mention the food buff that just happened as well. Don't think the Vampirism is as important for mid-game content anymore. Melee now has lifesteal as well. Here there was a mention of the wings that get added to you when using Salvation and Corruption auras. They say the wings will become unlocked at a threshold while burning Vire corpses. I imagine the Sunspear thing will tie into the achievements associated with burning Vires as well. I believe there's like some completionist requirements to burn a handful of them. Here there's a long comment about why auras should exist in the game, add tutorials for them, make sure that they unlock in game, teach players how to use auras. I guess it just depends how badly you want them in game. There's one person who said that, can we please be able to stack casts of aspects? So say if you cast it 5 times, you get 5 times the duration of it, meaning that you'd get a full hour of aspects. I mean, I don't think that's a terrible idea. If you are planning to stay at the boss for an hour, then stacking the aspects to an hour would be completely fine. I want less micromanagement, not more. Making Vampirism and Penance spells is a continued step in the wrong direction. I mean, if you were using Darkness already, it's not any more than you were using before. The buff bar in-game fucking sucks. Why do necrosis stacks not show up above your character? This is actually a topic I've been wanting to talk about. I just didn't know how to tie it into video, but maybe we could do it now. The buff bar does suck. I completely agree. And there was a way to make it better, and that was through Alt1's toolkit. Alt1 being an add-on you could install that would read your game screen and then give you additional information. It's sort of like RuneLite, but it's not as advanced. They even have a quote here from Mod Sponge.
This is what I'd like our buff bar to be.
He said it. It's coming. It's confirmed. Oh, wait, that was 2 years ago. Never mind. Essentially what it is it lets you pull out buffs that you would like to track. And then it gives you an easier place to look at the buffs you currently want to know information about. Now, this worked up until January when the new interface changes were turned from blue to brown that we have now. And since then, a lot of Alt1 toolkits plugins have been broken. Another popular plugin was Job Gauges, very useful for necromancy. It would track your necrosis stacks, your soul stacks, how long you had left on your bloat before it needed to be recast. It could also track like your death mark and your darkness. And there was also versions for magic and range too. And it was far easier to just look at this than to try to find the icons in the buff bar that keeps moving constantly, new icons popping in and popping out constantly. I mean, it's not really a problem for mid-game, as you can see from the video I've got on the screen right now. Grab that from an anonymous player doing Zuck. Things aren't really moving around because a lot of the buffs have quite a long duration. But if we swap over to someone doing high-level PVM Zamorak, you can see this thing is moving constantly, and finding the things you need to see is really challenging at that point. There's even more normally because this person was using melee. If you have necromancy, that adds like 6 or 7 additional icons that will pop in and out. It's just impossible to keep track of. So adding like a sort of shelf system where maybe the top one is for abilities, then maybe have consumables on one shelf, and then they can move back and forth on their designated shelf, but they don't necessarily have to all shift around constantly, right? And I mean, changing buff bar isn't something people have wanted just recently. It goes way back for years and years. A week ago, buff bar needs to be changed. I think the buff bar needs a rework. That was 1 month ago. Add a second buff bar for priority buffs 2 years ago. There's issues with buff bars for mobile users. Second time I bring up paint in one video, but I wanted to demonstrate another issue I have with the buff bar, that being timers not lining up properly. So overloads run for 6 minutes at a time. So I've bracketed it out to 30 minutes. That's how many overloads you would use. One aspect will last you 2 potions, for example, right? The problem is they start to unsync a little bit. Incense, on the other hand, doesn't work on the 6:12 ratio. It works on 10-minute intervals. And now you see if you're using incense, you have to stop halfway through your aspect. Otherwise, you have to add another one, which means you have 4 minutes without overloads or aspects before this runs out. Which, I mean, isn't the worst problem in the world. You could just lose that 4 minutes of incense, but powders are even more rigid because they just last a block of 30 minutes. If you wanted more, then you're just not getting your powder for 10 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever, or you have to invest in a whole nother 30 minutes. So you basically you can't stop PVMing for a full hour without losing some of your buffs because all of these systems have different amounts of time connected to them. Really, if overloads were 5 minutes instead, and aspects were 10 minutes, then everything would just match up more evenly. But since that's not the case, and I don't think people would be happy if you reduce their overload time, I just feel like there's ways you could make the system flow better. There's less micromanaging if you can boost yourself at very given times, right? But at the moment, everything's very sporadic. It would feel nicer if that didn't happen, right? So again, the buff bar is mainly a problem for endgame. And I feel like that's sort of a road to restoration topic that they could tackle in the future. I would really like to see them do that. It's not as pressing as some of the early game changes because buff bar really doesn't become a problem until high level bossing anyway. Though you could start to see some cracks in it with necromancy, I guess. One issue though is that a lot of short abilities might pop into your buff bar for a little bit, like 10 seconds, while they're being cast, and then they'll disappear again, and that obviously shifts everything around a little bit. There was also a time a long while back, I think, where certain buffs would jump around too, depending on how long time they had left. And they did fix that in the end. It was even worse before, is what I'm getting at. So it can be even better. It has more potential. People who AFK God Force Dungeon 2 bosses, free sustain, free prayer points. Oh, what do I choose? Why would Jagex allow you to use Darkness, Vampirism, and Penance all at the same time? There is something to be said about the side effects of having Vampirism and Penance even existing in the first place, right? Like, is it maybe an idea to remove them? I'm not saying that's the right thing to do or even advocating for that. I really like having them. But what if they didn't exist? Would that mean that food would become more popular? Would fishing become more profitable? Prayer potions are in the dumps in terms of price. In old school, I'm pretty sure you gain profit from making prayer potions because they're so in demand, but they're just not needed in RuneScape 3 at all because there's so many passive ways of gaining prayer points. We can sort of see that in the difference in price between Blessed Flask and normal prayer potions, with super restores and prayer potions costing only 1,000 coins per dose, whereas Blessed Flask, which is mainly used for high level players, 6 times higher. So would there actually be some money in prayer potions and Ranar weeds, and would it increase the price of simply herbs in general for prayer potions? I'd say that the main reason that prayer renewals have stuck so high is because they're tied to overloads, right? If you want the overload salve potions, you would need to combine those into overloads. Let me know what you think of the aura changes, though. I think it's cool that they're adding as aspects. I don't see that much of a problem with it being tied to the aspect system. I mean, sure, it is sort of a sustain nerf because you won't be able to use Darkness or Animate Dead alongside them anymore, but maybe that's a fine trade-off for being able to activate them whenever you feel like it. I think the rune cost is fine. That's a fair price to have them at. Some people are obviously advocating for 2 aspects at the same time. It might be the same people who are advocating for Penance and Vampirism to be active at the same time through War's Retreat as well. From a game balance perspective, I think that the way they're going about it is good. So let me know what you think as well. Drop a like. Thanks for watching.